Hi, my name is Ethan Ramos, and I'm the 86 kilogram representative for Puerto Rico. And today I just wanted to share some thoughts that I had about mentally fatiguing in a match. Right? So I was thinking about some matches that I've seen recently, and I was thinking, why is it that I see some people mentally or physically just break in a match, and where it's going well, and all of a sudden they hit this wall and they end up losing by a lot when it could have been a lot closer, or they could have even won the match, right? And they just look exhausted, right? That's confusing to me, because when you think about a college wrestling room and the type of practices people are doing, right? Or you think about resident athletes and how they're training, wrestlers in general, right? When you think about their types of practices, it doesn't make sense to me that people would get so tired that they have such a hard time getting off the mat, or they're just like a tight match can just explode and be, open up wide, right? Because if you think about a college practice, right? For example, you're gonna have an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, where you're focusing a lot on building cardio through hard drilling, through live matches. And a lot of times it's, sometimes it's matches that are longer than normal, right? Like 5 minutes without a break, or 10-minute matches, or 3 7-minute matches with only 1 minute break in between, right? And that's all after you've drilled already for maybe 30, 40 minutes, right? So it's like, how is it possible that we can have wrestlers then come to the mat, and maybe within 2 to 4 minutes, they seem to be just exhausted, and the score goes from being tied 1-1, or maybe it's 3-1 or whatever, and now it's all of a sudden it's blown wide open, and there's a major or a tech fall or whatever, right? So this got me thinking, like, what could be the reason for that? And I think what it mainly is mental. It's not really physical. Now, I'll give you a little side note on the end with the physical, but because it could be physical, and that's something that you as a wrestler need to address if that's the case. But I think it's more mental because of all the things I just said, right? Like, we train so hard in practices weekly that we shouldn't really get tired like that. So, but when it comes to our mental side, right, mental fatigue can happen very quickly. And it can be a lot harder to control as well, especially if you don't have it. Like, you might be newer to wrestling. You might have just not had the opportunity to grow it really in high school if you were really good and didn't have many obstacles to get past, right? We might not have enough obstacles in our past that have made us be able to be mentally resilient. But I think the more that we can build that, the better we'll do in matches, right? The more that we'll be able to actually rely on our physical cardio and be able to get through the match and do what we have practiced throughout the week, right? So that mental side of it is something that you got to build, something that you got to earn, and that's through practice, right? It's through doing things that are hard, right? So this would be just a segment where I just want to encourage you to, with your practices, make sure that you're doing all the things that can kind of build your confidence, and where you can earn mental toughness, right? So that might be things like in your drill, you're going really hard, you're racing to be the first one up after a takedown. You're taking a lot more shots than normal. You're fully focused on the technique and the technical aspects of that technique, so that you're now mentally and physically engaged. So now you're a little more tired overall, right? In matches, you actually try the things that you've been working in the drilling section of the practice, which is tough, right? Because we want to be comfortable in matches during practice, even especially after we've drilled and are exhausted, right? So now that's a spot where you can really earn mental toughness, is saying, all right, well, I might lose this match because I'm going to try something, right? But I'm going to get better from this, and when the matches come that actually matter, which is outside of the room, then I'll be ready and I'm not going to be tired, right? So it's doing things like that. So the other thing is what we think about ourselves, right? So now you have this one side of it that is that maybe you're not as mentally tough or resilient as you should be. All right, so you got to build that. You got to address that first, and you got to build on it, right? Through all the things I just said. The other aspect might be on just what you tell yourself, right? So if you tell yourself that you're a person that doesn't have good cardio, it's likely that you're going to be doing behaviors that coincide with that, right? So you might find that you're not racing to be the first one up, that you're really dogging it in the jogs or the sprints, that you're not really pushing it and drilling, you're very lackadaisical, and in matches you're just kind of holding position and waiting for your opponent to score, and then you're giving half-hearted defense, or you're just finding partners that are easier for you, right? That happens a lot as well, right? So, but if you tell yourself that you have good cardio, or you tell yourself like you have the ability to, if you feed yourself those kind of things where you identify more with being a person that is really tough, has a lot of cardio, can't get tired, things like that, now your behaviors will start to reflect that a little more, because you're not gonna want to have this cognitive dissonance where you're thinking one thing and you're doing something else, right? You're gonna want to be matched up. So that's another thing that I think you can do right now, is just decide the kind of wrestler you want to be, and then start taking actions that reflect that, and be diligent to make that a habit. Now, the other thing is how we approach matches, right? So a lot of times people get really mentally fatigued before they get into the match, and that's because you're thinking of, oh, I might lose, I might give up points, how am I going to look if I do lose, or thinking like, oh, I got to win, right? And when you think about all those things, like, those are all very broad terms, right? Like, even just, I got to win. How many different ways can you win, right? It's like almost infinite possibilities of how you can do it. You might be thinking that one thought, but that encompasses so much, and your body and your mind start to think like, oh, I can go this route, this route, this route, this route. And it's not really zoned in or focused, right? And that can be exhausting on the mind, and that'll then reflect in your physical performance, right? Or thinking negative thoughts about like, I can't let them score points. I can't let them get to my legs or to the single leg. They have a great single. I can't let them get to that, right? That kind of thing also can be exhausting, right? Because maybe you're thinking, oh, they can't get to the single, but how many different ways they can get to the single, right? There's a lot of different ways. So rather than doing it like that, right, you got to think more along the lines of what you need to do to be able to get to the best position that you can get to, right? And then you got to think about something very simple that can help you think, that can help your body be able to be as efficient as possible within that movement, right? So, for an example, I know that I have a good snap, right? And I know that when I snap a specific way, I can get to a single, a double, a high crotch, ankle pick, or a front head, right? So I got a lot of options from that snap. And I know that my body will react a specific way because I've kind of programmed it to now, right? So I know if I snap, I'm going to take that shot. I'm going to, most likely, right, if I let it develop, I'm going to keep my head up and my hips in. I'm going to get deep, and then I'm going to rush to finish it in a specific way, right? And I know like the little nuances to it. And so when I focus on, all right, I just need to be diligent to when I feel them hanging on me, I'm going to snap, right? I'm going to snap. And then I'm going to let the feedback come. I'm going to register it. And that's where I might need to make a little adjustment, and where I might be like, all right, in mid-match, where I might be like, all right, I'm going to be hitting a high crotch or a double or a single, whatever it is, right? So I know that that's going to help. The other part is how to finish, right? So I know that once I'm in, right, I need to keep my head up and my hips in for most shots, most takedowns, right? So I think about that, because when I get in the high crotch, right, I want to get my hips in and my head up, and then I want to cut across hard, right? And that's going to help me think about all the other little things without actually having to think about it, because it's programmed in me, because I've done it over and over and over again, right? So I've earned that ability to do that, but because I focus on those things. So that's going back to what I said before. But it's also that I'm figuring out what's the trigger that's going to help me to let everything else go along, right? So now, that being said, the other part is being ready for adversity, right, within a match. Because sometimes you get people that, all right, they prepared really well for that match. And then all of a sudden, a ref makes a bad call. They make a mistake. Their opponent just, does something really good. And now they're up by a point or a couple points, whatever it is. And now you think, oh, like, I got to scrap my plan and I got to just go, right? And I've been there before, right? You get kind of flustered and you start just taking wild shots. Or you do nothing because your brain just wants to shut down, right? Or now you hit this wall and you get so exhausted, which is like what I'm talking about, because what I've seen is you get so exhausted that now the score is 1-1, maybe 3-1, whatever it is, and now the score just blows wide open, and you get like a major decision happening, a tech fall, when it was a really close match to begin with. And that's because they're not prepared for the adversity that might come. Right, so one way I would say to prepare for adversity is knowing that, say they're really good at an underhook, right? If you can focus on if you can focus on one position that'll help you to defend all of their underhooks, then that's going to save your mind a lot of energy, right? Because you're just not thinking, I got to defend his underhook because he can score. I can't let him score from the underhook, right? Because from the underhook, you can get a front headlock, a knee pick, a snatch single, throw by, whatever it is. There's a lot of scores that can happen from an underhook. But if I just say, hey, I'm going to thigh pry, I'm going to circle to that, right? That'll negate a lot of scores. And of course, your opponent might be really good and be able to counteract that. But you're now prepared for that, and you're wrestling now, and you're not thinking as much about that. And you're going to be able to sense that, all right, they're doing a counter, and then you're going to find something else to counter it, right? But it's being prepared for those moments, that knowing that they can happen, they might happen, and that you have something in place that's going to help you to defend it. And with that, one more thing I'll say is, like, for example, if you get someone that's a really good shooter, if you just think about baseline defense, right? We all know what that means, right? Get your chest up, your hips in, shoelaces to the mat, sliding off them, right? Squaring up your hips, right? All of those kind of things are programmed within that one statement, baseline defense, right? So if you can get your mind wrapped around that and focus on that, then you're not going to have a lot of energy going to that within your mind to then get you exhausted when they're shooting on you, right? So I think that's really important. And then the other aspect is that you don't want to have this thing where even like it happens when you're winning, right? Like you start winning and it's tight and there's maybe a minute, 2 minutes left, and now you switch game plans and you're going from offensive minded to defensive minded, right? When you do that, that also gets exhausting, because now you got to think about a whole different way of thinking than you were actually prepared to do, right? So if you're going to have that game plan, be prepared for that as well. Like, all right, I'm going to build up my lead, and then when I get to that lead, I'm going to be a little more, I'm still going to be offensive minded, but I'm going to be a little more disciplined in my stance. I'm going to be looking for more reattacks, if anything like that, right? And that's going to help you to stay zoned in, focused, and not as exhausted at the end of the match. So all that being said, physical aspects could be a part of the problem. And if you find that that's the case, then that's something you got to address. And that's something that you should just address immediately, right? Assume that you have bad cardio if it shows in the match, right? And just take care of that, right? With doing the things I suggested before, like going really hard in practice. But the other aspect is it could be real simple. Something like after practice, you go and you bike for 30 minutes at like a medium pace, right? It's not hard, it's light, and that kind of stuff is going to build your cardio for sure. If you feel that it is physical, or if you don't even feel like it's physical, focus on that anyway, because it'll just help you in the long run. And the more physically fit you feel, the more you believe that you have good cardio, and that's going to carry over into the mental game within the match. So these are just my thoughts. If you have any suggestions or thoughts on it, feel free to leave a comment below. If you got some value from this video and you're agreeing with it, please share the video with people you think that it'll help. Give it a like and subscribe. And let me know if you have any suggestions for future videos in the comments below. And thank you for watching.